In this lesson, I'm going to talk about how to multiply a decimal times a decimal. Now, as a quick little refresher, the last lesson that we did a whole number times a decimal. So in this case, we did 5 times 4/10, and we showed the multiple different strategies that you can use to multiply that decimal times the whole number. Like we used the equal groups model where we did 5 equal groups of our 4/10, which was our decimal. So 5 is our whole number, 4/10 would be our decimal. So if I had 5 groups of 4/10, I would have 20 tenths or 2 whole units. We also did skip counting where I used a number line and I jumped 4/10 5 different times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps of 4/10 each. And I arrived at 2 at my last jump. So my answer is 2. Now another way to think about that in skip counting is to do like repeated addition. So 4/10 plus 4/10 plus 4/10 plus 4/10 plus 4/10, and I would get 2 whole units on that. Now I am left-handed, so just bear with me. All right, we also talked about how to do it with an array. So I am going to shade in 4/10 5 different times, very similar to my equal groups model, and I count how many whole squares I have shaded in at the end. So in this case, if I shaded in 5 groups of 4/10, I would have 2 whole units shaded in. So we talked about using for different values and different things, and we said that one of these square blocks is equal to 1 whole unit in this case. So if I shaded in one of these squares, that was like shading in 1 whole unit. Now my standard form for this, I would multiply these two numbers as if my decimal wasn't there. So I have 4/10 times 5, and 4 times 5 is 20. Now how I figure out where to put my decimal in my answer place is I can do it one of 2 ways. I can count up my decimal places. Like this one, I have 0 numbers behind my decimal, so I'm gonna write a 0. On my bottom row, I have 1 behind the decimal, so I'm gonna write 1. 0 plus 1 is 1, so I would move my decimal over 1 time. Another way that I've seen students do it is they circle the numbers behind the decimal, and however many circles they have, they move that over 1 time. Either way works. I did the same thing for multiplying a whole number times a 100th instead of a 10th. Same processes. In this case, I'm going to shade in those hundredths 8 different times, sorry, to get a total of 4/10 and 8 hundredths, 48 hundredths. So my point with that, to refresh your brain, is to show you that when you're multiplying a whole number times a decimal, your shading in sections are going to be side by side. So I have 1 section here, I have 1 section here, 1 section here, 1 section here, 1 here. How it's different when you multiply a decimal by decimal is your 2 colors that you're going to use to shade in these arrays are going to overlap like this. Now let me show you what I mean. So my first number on this first problem, tenths times tenths, is I have 4/10, and my second one I have 3/10. I'm going to choose 2 different colors, one of which is going to be a little bit lighter than the other. So on my first color, I am going to shade in 4/10 going up and down. So I'm going to shade in 1, 2, 3, 4/10. I'm going to shade those in completely. Now, my second color, I am going to use to shade in my 3/10. Now, how I'm going to shade this in is I'm now, instead of going up and down, I'm going to go from side to side. So 1, 2, 3/10, I'm going to shade in from side to side. So my answer to this problem is going to be all the boxes that are shaded in with both colors. Now if you look, I have this section right here that's shaded in with both colors. Now if this one row is a 10th, this one box is going to be a 100th. So I'm going to count how many hundredths have both colors. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I have 12 hundredths as my answer. So 0.12. Now I can check my answer using the standard algorithm, and we talked about the standard algorithm a moment ago. So I'm going to multiply these numbers as if my decimal is not there. So 3/10 times 4/10. Okay, I can also take the zeros off. That works fine as well. All right, so 4 times 3 is 12. So I'm going to write my 2, carry my 1. 4 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. All right, now it's time for me to count up my decimal places. So on the top row, I have 1 decimal place. I have 1 number behind the decimal. On my bottom row, I have 1 number behind the decimal. 1 plus 1 is 2. So I'm going to move this decimal, my imaginary decimal back here. I'm going to move it over 1, 2 times, always counting the spaces in between the numbers. Don't count the numbers themselves because it gets kind of confusing. So my answer would be 12 hundredths. All right, let's do one more to practice. All right, so this problem I have 3/10 times 2/10. So I'm going to get my 2 colors. It doesn't matter what colors you choose. And I'm going to take my first color and I'm going to shade in 3/10 going up and down. So 1, 2, 3/10. So I'm going to shade those tenths in. Okay, so I have 3/10 shaded in going up and down. Okay, my next number, my second number is 2/10. So I'm going to shade in those 2/10 going from side to side. So 1/10, 2/10. All right, shade that in. Okay, so I'm going to now count the spots, the boxes that have both colors inside of it. So that would be this section right here that's overlapping. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now each one of those little bitty spots doesn't represent a tenth, it represents a hundredth. So my answer is going to be 6 hundredths, 0.06. Be very careful to not just write decimal 6 because that tells me that you have 6/10 shaded in with both colors. And I don't, I only have 6 hundredths. So let's do this using the standard algorithm to check our answer. So I have 3/10 times 2/10. Now I took the zeros off of this problem just to show you how it can be done. 3 times 2 is 6. All right, so I'm going to stop there. Now I need to count up my numbers behind my decimal points. So I have 1 on this line, so there's a 1. I have 1 on this line, so there's a 1. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Okay, so every whole number we know behind it has an imaginary decimal, right? So I'm going to take that imaginary decimal and I'm going to jump it to the left 2 times. So 1, 2. If you notice, I didn't have a space here, a circle here to count, but I'm going to still count a space. And I'm going to insert my decimal right there. But I can't just leave that big empty space there. I have to fill it in with a 0. And I can also put my 0 in the front as well. So 6/10 is my answer, and I checked it and it comes out correct.